Oh dear, you must not understand that blah blah blah. Like, oh, how about I give you a response that blows you out of the water, you little fuck?
I really don't mean to be rude, but no, no. I like being rude.
2.5-year-old human baby who is entirely selfish and yet a very sweet and lovable little reproduction of our own selves. Wow, that's gross. Don't break your kid's spirit. And he's like, "What? You're gonna get all up in your sensitivity about breaking a kid's spirit? Well, how else am I gonna make them obey God?" Society cannot seem to reconcile itself to the fact that love and punishment could possibly come from the same source.
Yeah, BDSM.
Oh
Sorry.
God. Welcome to another conversation with the Apostate Sisters. I'm Patti, and I make this podcast with my sister Nancy. We grew up in a doomsday cult called the Worldwide Church of God. We're also nerdy about history and culture, but critical of religion. So get ready to get mad or to nod your head in agreement as we embark on today's topic. So today we're going to take a hard and critical look at our cult's child rearing policies and the lasting effects that it had. But we're not going to stop there. We see those same harmful practices reflected in mainstream Christianity, in evangelicalism, and in the culture at large. Our goal is to expose how these systems hurt children and hurt society, in our broader goal of liberating the cult kids of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Let's get started. Okay, well, Nancy, we're coming to this conversation knowing that we have already talked specifically about spanking, and we have talked somewhat in broad terms of what child rearing means to us and how your autonomy meant you didn't want children and mine meant I did, and that my sense around autonomy greatly influenced how I chose to raise my kids. And I have really big feelings about that. But what we haven't really gotten into is the deep, dark heart of what the WCG actually taught. So,
Yeah.
kind of the landscape in which we came into. Now, a big caveat to this, though, is that, when we were kids, the WCG theology was right, or the WCG child rearing guidelines were kind of right in the middle of changing.
Hmm.
So I think what we're going to do today is look a little bit farther back than our time frame of growing up to recognize like who the people in this church were and the kinds of impacts that they would have had from the way the church advocated for child rearing. Because we know that back in, from the 50s to the 70s, the church was incredibly strict in how they controlled their people and made their people control their kids. So highly about obedience and immediate submission to authority was the baseline, right? So I wanted to kind of draw some of that out, reference a couple of stories from kids who grew up under those situations, but also take that forth and see how that impacted people beyond just the church.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, looking forward to it.
The absolute parental authority is probably the place to start if we're going to talk about the WCG. I mean, it was absolutely the idea that, the parent or especially the father would be in this role of absolute authority over his family,
Hmm.
over his wife, over the children, and that was supposed to reflect how he was supposed to submit to God. And they even looped in things about submitting to government, because they were very strict on believing that God had placed the government in charge. And so therefore we were to adhere to those rules.
Yes, I feel like a lot of evangelical churches did the same thing.
All right, so Nancy, when we talk about how we were raised, the big thing that comes up for us is the word obedience. And we
Ugh.
even I know. See, you and I have this very specific response to the idea of obedience. And to me, it
Hmm.
makes sense because looking back at WCG
Yeah.
ideas around that, it was absolutely the idea that if a child was told to do something, they were not to question, they were not to hesitate, they were to
Hmm.
go and do that thing, no questions asked. And like, I see some obvious problems with that because, if you're taught not to question, you could be told to do something that isn't good, that's not healthy for you, that hurts other people, right?
Correct.
So, like,
Yes.
we even got into it a little bit about the word obedience with Tim Mills over on Harmonic Atheist, because I think we were coming from different places on how that word hit for us. So, when you hear obedience, you already kind of had a little "Bleh" gag response, but
Right.
what does that represent to you? Like, how does it hit you, and why do you think that is?
You just do what you were told. And that set me up for so much failure in my adult life. When I was taught not to question things, oh my God, what does that make you as an adult? It just makes you a compliant little slave, is what it does to society, to anyone who thinks they can control you. If you're taught to be obedient from a young age. I would have respected the word obedience a lot more had it been a situation where, like Tim Mills explains in our interview with him, where, yeah, he tells his children they have to brush their teeth. But he at least explains why they have to brush their teeth. He doesn't give them an option not to. This is something you have to do. And he lets them know why it's good for them to do this, not just like, I told you to do it and therefore you do it. Without any context, without any explanation. I think that is so harmful. Did you find the same thing, Pat?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, think of the things that you could be made to do that
Hmm.
aren't okay if
Yeah.
you're just taught to question. And it's like, how does a child go from, I just do what I'm told by the authority figure to trying to be an autonomous adult, right?
You
Like,
don't. You don't.
it doesn't work. But here's the thing, it serves society. If a kid is good at just being told what to do and they do it, they will get up and punch their fucking clock and run their machine all day and
Hmm.
not question, not demand to be paid a living wage, not demand that they have human rights, right? So, like, systems of control are all connected.
That keeps
And
people
so,
in the churches too, keeps the tithe money coming in. You create obedient children, you create obedient adults.
same damn thing.
You
It's
have them
control.
exactly where you want. It all comes down to control. And I feel, Patty, like this topic is really just encompassing a lot of different topics that we've discussed on this channel too. I mean, in this category, yes, we're talking about bodily autonomy with our series at the moment. And that's all it comes down to is autonomy. I know there's a fine line between trying to I like the word guide your children as opposed to train your children. Guide them. Guide them how to think, not what to think. Um, I know it seems pretty elementary to me, but there are far too many parents out there that have just decided what is right and they're training their children up the same way instead of telling them, hey, you have a mind of your own. I'm going to tell you you have to do this, but I will explain why. And hopefully you will understand why. I said this maybe someday when you get to be a, a parent.
Well, I mean, and then you recognize that like when we're already in a system of control like a church, they've got the Bible to
Hmm.
use as a control, right? They've convinced people when they were too young to have other thoughts about it that this is truth. This Bible is everything. And if I'm the one holding it and pointing out things in it, I must know more than you. And so therefore you have to believe what I'm telling you it says. Right?
Right.
So it's like Proverbs 13:24, the he who spares the rod hates his son, right? Spare the rod, spoil the child, all that shit,
Yep.
right? Yeah,
And
so
look how
it's
well that worked out for us, Paz. What a loving, compassionate, and open and understanding relationship we have with our parents today. Right.
that was not what they were going for.
I
That
know,
was
but
not the
that's,
goal. Creating
I know.
minions was the goal.
Right.
And if, yeah. So yeah, that is the starting point of the worldwide Church of God. We need to make sure that everyone lives rightly in God's ways with a manicured lawn and a taffeta dress, right? We have seen this in our Unpack It Live series, Watching the World Tomorrow, this like weird, sickly, sweet Pleasantville vision that the worldwide Church of God was trying to put out there, right? It's a little
Yes.
little boxes on the hillside, little boxes made of
Little
ticky tacky.
boxes on the hillside.
Little boxes made of ticky tacky, little boxes on the hillside.
And they all look just the same. Oh,
But
yeah,
in the
exactly.
WC, exactly, right? But in the WCG, they did everything they could to try to create this conformity within their ranks, right?
Mm.
Well, so I mean, they used the Bible as their main weapon, but then that was used in, like we talked about in our spanking episode, to reach out to, rods, paddles, spoons, shoes, whatever it was that you were using to hit your child to keep them conforming and obeying so that you could create this vision of God's perfect world.
Hmm. Right. Well, and how do you think our parents feel about that? The fact that, yeah, they got us to obey. They got us to listen to them through fear. We were afraid of being punished, which of course for us punishment meant either soap in the mouth or spanking. I don't remember any other punishment, do you? Like, do we get sent home?
I got sent to my room and had to like write out 10 times, I will not, whatever. You know what I did then, though? What I did when I had to write stuff out, I refused to write it as a full sentence so that I didn't have to think of the sentence they were making me want to say. I just wrote the first word 10 times and then the next
Hmm.
word 10 times. And I was literally, I knew in my head that I was defying them because I was not going to actually think the sentence that they wanted me to think. But like that is,
You
I'm
rebel.
gonna have, I'm gonna have to honor little me around that because that was me like recognizing that I was being controlled and I was pushing back against it. I was like, you think you're gonna, condition my brain by making me repeat the sentence over and over? Like, let's see how that goes for you.
But I do just wonder what our parents think about all this. Like, yes, they got us to obey. Now what? Okay, we're autonomous adults. We've always been autonomous, even though some people have tried to take that away from us. Many people have tried to take it away. But what do our parents think now? Yes, you got us to obey. Now what? We don't have any kind of good relationship. But again, maybe it is like you said. They don't, that wasn't their goal. We literally are just vessels for God's kingdom, and maybe they think that, oh, we'll have a relationship at that point, meaning a relationship where we all just serve God together and that's it. Was that really their goal?
Well, I think the church convinced them that that should be their goal,
Because I
right?
feel like
Because
other
they
people,
needed to do their job. It wasn't about our safety. It wasn't about our long-term well-being except for being in the kingdom.
right, right.
And to do it, they didn't even care that they had to break the will of the children. And this was stated by the church that you have to break the child's will.
They said that. Oh
Yeah.
gosh, I'm not looking
Um,
forward to whatever material you have to show it to me today. Oh gosh.
so actually, I think I'll read quick. So this is from someone in our Discord.
Okay.
So I reached out to the folks that are in our WCG Cult Survivor Discord. Reach out if you are a cult survivor of the Worldwide Church of God or its offshoots, and you'll uh, be invited to the Discord. But I heard back when I was asking questions about the child rearing practices that they remembered, and one person replied, blanket training was the biggest thing I remember. Training a 6-month-old to sit on a blanket for 2 hours, quiet, was ridiculous. I remember having to take notes of the sermons as young as 8 or 10 years old. Um, and then also saying, I also know there was a big thing around spanking your child daily to put the fear of God in them. I know that led to a lot of physical abuse. I personally was never spanked every day, but have come across stories about it.
And we will definitely state here that spanking is abuse in and of itself.
Well,
So,
absolutely. But right, if the church is putting forth a message of do this every day to make sure your child stays on the path that they need to be on.
right.
But it's kind of selfish. It's like it was the parents needing to do their godly duty
Hmm.
by way of treating their children this way.
Yeah.
So I don't personally remember the blanket training, and we'll see if that comes up in any of the child rearing books that we have to go through here today. But yeah, it's like we've also discovered that given a region's proclivities toward how they treated children, it was just kind of like the negatives were amplified within the WCG.
Now,
So
blanket training, I mean, in a way, we were kind of blanket trained. That's
yes,
an interesting term. I mean, we had to sit, yes, on a cold cement floor 4 hours on a blanket, sometimes as many as 3 or 4 hours at a time. And we were supposed to not fidget, not make noise. So yeah, I'd say
correct.
that's blanket training.
Yep,
Yes,
yep.
when
I don't
we should
know.
be
It
out
was
exploring the world.
Yeah, I mean, but it's pretty great at stopping kids from having novel ideas if they don't get to see the world. They can't go astray from God's laws if they aren't exposed to, you know, the world.
That's a
But
very
so
good
blanket
point.
training, I know we're going to get more into evangelicalism in a little bit, but blanket training shows up in some of the more fundy evangelical side of things as well.
Mhm.
Um, and it's absolutely a method for trying to make a child that will listen and obey, no questions asked. So the heart of it is that a child is placed on a blanket in the middle of the room, and and this is like at the age of crawling or like scooting, right? This is like very
Right.
little. So if that child crawls off the edge of the blanket, they're picked up, spanked, and put back on the blanket. And every time the child leaves the blanket, they are spanked and put back on it.
Oh gosh. So like training a fucking dog to stay within the area of the fence.
Yeah. I mean, I think they would do things like put stuff the kids would want just off the blanket, and they would have to realize, oh, I'm not going to do that because I'll get hit.
Oh, that's disgusting.
Yes, it is.
Wow. See all these great things that you can't have, you will never have because it's out of bounds. Fuck all the way off.
I mean, a baby is born curious,
Yeah.
and curiosity is how we learn.
Mm-hmm.
I know teachers would like to think it's something else, but it fucking isn't. And so if we put a kid on a blanket and don't let them leave it, and we teach them that their curiosity equals pain, we have got them for life. And that's what the WCG did.
Wow, what a revelation, Pats.
No shit, huh?
Have
And
we
I don't
talked
know
to you?
how it was done to us. We were definitely good at staying on our blanket between the seats at church.
Mm-hmm.
Were we spanked to learn that before we could even remember?
I don't remember.
I
Probably.
remember as a kid finding like I'd be on the crocheted blanket with it like over me. And I remember just loving like looking at the light poking through the holes in the blanket, like I remember finding all those things very fascinating. So like you cannot stop a kid from being curious and interested in the world. You could
Mm-hmm.
just make their world smaller and make them dumber in it by limiting them and trying to
Oh,
conform them. And by breaking their will, you're going to cause a whole lot of other problems.
wow.
Yeah,
Can
WCG,
you can you imagine
Worldwide Church of God. That's what they did.
can you imagine if Armstrong had his way and he was still around and the whole world was just becoming Worldwide Church of God? Can you imagine that shit? Just a bunch of just slave robot type people going to the feast, going to Sabbath every Saturday, doing the same shit. What a life. Eh,
But apparently God would be happy about it.
this is overwhelming. It's so eye-opening at the same time to think something as simple as blanket training could cause us to lose our curiosity and our drive, our excitement for life.
Well, and there are people who would say it doesn't, who are like, oh, that was when you were so little, you can't remember it, just move on.
No,
Like, you cannot take shit like that. You can't just take a landfill and of bullshit that you've gone through and put a layer of concrete over it and think you can keep going. Shit
yep.
doesn't work that way. It will start collapsing under you at some point.
I don't think our parents actually pushed us to certain things that maybe other households did. Like, yeah, okay, we had to memorize some verses from the Bible, but that was for, like the youth ministers. I don't even know what that was for. That was part of our lessons, but mom and dad never made us read the Bible, ever, right? I don't remember that. We had our lessons as kids, but then like they never pushed us to like read the Bible or try to understand any of it.
Maybe it's because we were girls. Because I feel like some of the male friends we have come across, well, if I feel like having met our friend Joel, Mr. Difficult, what he experienced seemed like he was very much given the depth of theology, and I don't think we were. So whether
No.
that was just because that's who our parents were, or whether that's because we were girls, I mean, it just seemed like our parents cared about doing, right? Like there are rules, there are do's and don'ts, and that's what you follow, and that's what keeps you safe. There wasn't like a necessity of understanding, as far as I could
Hmm.
tell. Maybe
Yeah.
when we were real little, because apparently I was, spouting off about God's first fruits and the first resurrection or whatever when I was 2 years old at some poor woman in the laundromat, to which our parents were incredibly proud.
Why is it the word first fruits that I find so much more cringy than any other word we were brought up with, like pagan and obedience? No, it's first fruits was the word that got me. I was
I
like,
mean,
this
it's
is
because it's the
so fucking dumb. I think of Margaret Atwood's Handmaid's Tale, where the maids have to say this dumb shit like "Blessed be the fruit" to each other and "May the Lord open." It's so fucking cringe. I gag every time I hear shit like that, and that's what the word first fruits reminds me of. Like hearing my mother say, "First fruits, first fruits."
ugh,
And like, I don't
ah,
even know what the fuck it means. Come on.
oh, you're so right. Well, I probably couldn't go into the full theology on first fruits either, and nor do I even care to have that shit in my head. But the first fruits thing was absolutely a we're better than you. It totally was.
It
It was
always
we're
was.
part of the chosen, the first fruits, the first to rise in Christ. Like it was, yeah, it was definitely used as a reminder of you're better than the other people. So keep giving us your money.
Mm. I
Hmm.
just never understood the concept, Pats, of needing to feel superior to other people because to me, it is that sense of community, of relating to people on all these different, in all these different walks of life. That's how I gain happiness. And for me to sit there and be like, oh, I'm the first fruit, I'm better than you, I don't get anything out of that. In fact, I hate it. I'd be like, when I owned a restaurant, Pats, I would go out with, some of our employees and hang out, and I would always tell them, I'm like, don't tell people I own the restaurant. I want you to treat me just as if I'm another worker there. I want to go out and have a good time. I don't want you to like elevate me. I hated that position.
Yes. Hmm.
I don't want to be seen as like so and so owns that place. Oh, and then all of a sudden I have all these fake friends that people want to be friends with me now, knowing that I own a restaurant. No, I never liked it. I never liked being elevated. I
Right.
like being relatable.
Right. I mean, the thing is, I think that's probably how everyone would be, except for if you get broken. Like
Good
the
point.
church
Yes.
had to make the kids afraid in order to make them need to be elevated. Well, not just the kids. Obviously, it was more the parents getting that, but that's how it got passed on to the kids and what influenced how they raise the kids, right? So the kids are exposed to all the fear-inducing end times prophecy stuff right away. They
Hmm.
know that like they're not worthy of having a good life and stuff because they're not going to be able to live up to these expectations because the expectations put on kids for behavior of like not fidgeting, basically being mini adults and just having it all like, like
Hmm.
no emotions. You just do what you're supposed to do. Like it is only in those conditions of a person not feeling loved, not having their needs met emotionally, right? And to have this fear put in them that they're not going to live up to something that's going to be like really bad forever and always. You need those things in place
Hmm.
to get people to a place where you can like make them hate on each other so that they can feel better because they're
Well,
acting on fear and that fear is
yes.
put in by the church.
But it gave them a sense of belonging. Our parents were extremely vulnerable to those messages. Both of them. Both of them had, I think, really hard lives. Our mother especially. Holy shit. Both of them, I think, don't didn't have a lot of love growing up. Both of them lost parents when they were young, and our mother, I mean, her whole adoption situation, I mean, who she won't even talk about the things that happened to her.
Well, right.
And
I mean,
yeah,
yeah.
and Worldwide Church of God gave her the solution. They gave her the validation and what she thought was love that she needed. For them to for them to swoop in and take full advantage of it.
Right. And we always come back to this, that the people who did these things to their children, as directed by the WCG, were victims first.
Hmm.
They were victims probably of their own upbringing, whether it was WCG or not. I mean, we just have to recognize like how hard life has been because being born, at the start of the 80s, like you and I were, we've had it very good.
Yep.
Like medical care that has existed in the world and transportation, just like modern life,
Yep.
birth control that we talked about. Like so many babies died. Like 100 years ago, so many babies died. Life was so hard that like I think the way we think about these like parent-child bonds and how that can be and the way we talk about emotional intelligence and like our sense of self and our confidence and our ability to engage healthily in the world like that is all pretty new conversations
Yeah.
that we can only be having now because of our advancements, because of our modernity of things, of thought, of tools, of life-sustaining medical things. Like the world is different. So it's like I'm not trying to be like, everything's evil and bad and we should all be
Hmm.
angry about the past. Like it just is what it is. But we
Hmm.
can expose it now so it doesn't
And
keep
stop
happening.
it from continuing on. That is the goal. I
Break
remember,
cycles.
yes, the road to freedom has quite a few different steps. And I think anyone in this space kind of has a role to play. Like the steps for us in our road to freedom, which for us was atheism, because I love being free of any religious doctrine. But hey, if people want to have a religion, fine. Just make sure it doesn't control other people. People. I truly believe people cannot control their beliefs, but they can control whether or not their beliefs control other people. Big difference. And so the steps for us anyway, we grew up in the cult. We somehow found our ways out of it, and then we stepped a little bit in the right direction when we went into evangelicalism. But it didn't take long to realize that was bullshit as well. And then we got out, and then we slowly went into atheism. And so that one of those steps is the whole deconstruction. Like, okay, this is just not amounting up. Whether a person believed it or not from the start, there was always going to be something that you had to deconstruct. teachings, beliefs, things that you just had to get rid of to be free. And then from that point, you find your sense of community. And then after that, you go through maybe a healing of trauma process, right? Which is kind of the stage where you and I are at as far as like being part of this community, having content online. And then after that is just total and complete freedom, which I think is more people like Neil the 604 atheist and Mikey Famine and all these people online that they just love having that community and talking with people. That's true freedom. Once they've finally reached the point where they don't believe any of this controlling doctrine anymore, and now they can start living their lives because they don't have traumas that are controlling them. The problem is a lot of people do get stuck at one of those levels, whether they're still in like a fundamentalist cult situation or they've found themselves in evangelicalism, which I think is still control, in my opinion. Um, it's just wearing a prettier coat. It's actually more manipulative in my mind. Um, or they're stuck with what they believe. Maybe they are struggling with, oh, does a God exist or not? I mean, these are all steps that we have to go through to be completely free and our autonomous selves. Or maybe someone's stuck at the trauma. They're still dealing with the trauma of this, and that can keep them from feeling like they're actually free to live their lives how they choose to, which is the goal. But I love seeing people finally getting to that point where even Prophet of Zod, I'm going to reference him because he's always had a great channel. He's been talking about, deconstruction and picking the Bible apart. Well, now he is not going to have that channel anymore. He's to the point where he finally feels free enough. He's just going to start talking about his own interests. It doesn't control him anymore. And I love seeing him get to that point. And you and I, Patty, I think are at that point as well. Like we still can pinpoint some of the religious trauma as we're talking about it on our channel here, but it doesn't really control our lives anymore. Like we are free of it, and it's important to us that other people get to that point, which is why we're discussing it. And in fact, I think majority of why we do this is to help other people also overcome and heal from those traumas of religious control.
Oh, I absolutely agree with everything you said about that, Nancy. And I think it points to what we've been realizing about our channel because we didn't know really when we started this what we wanted to do, but we knew we had our shit to share and
Hmm.
we knew there was probably others and maybe somebody needed to hear it. And and that has led us on this journey where you're right. It's like we're recognizing we're not the deconstruction zone. We're not the place where we're going to help people like lose their faith
Hmm.
and sort through the theology and the stuff. We're the ones that are here for those who left a long time ago because they knew it was horseshit but there wasn't resources or they didn't really like pick through that. And maybe they need to hear something from us to be validated that, like, yes, no wonder you're still feeling that way. That shit lingers. It's
Hmm.
not like you can just move past it and be like, well, I don't believe it anymore, so now my life is fine. Like,
Which we
no.
did for a long time. You and I did that for a long time, Pats. We had gotten away from both the WCG as well as evangelicalism, and we just didn't want anything to do with it for years. But then we started realizing as we're talking to each other almost daily, oh, this shit is still lingering. We need to discuss it. Let's just do it publicly and see if somebody else can get something out of it as well. And I love
Right.
that we started that. I love it. But
I know. We're like tier two, right? We're like tier two
yes.
post-religion, right? We're not the like helping you come out and like lose that first round of faith. This is, yeah, exactly that. Like, wow, the things that still affect us and that's okay. It doesn't, you don't have to feel like, oh, I should be over this. Because I think a lot of people feel that way, like, ah, this shouldn't still
Mhm.
bother me. And I think sometimes we have behaviors or struggles that we don't actually even realize are connected to our church stuff. We just think we're fucked up, right? Because that's how the church taught us to think of it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
Exactly. Yes.
I wanted to bring out the Worldwide Church of God book. So it's called The Plain Truth About Child Rearing, and they had several editions of it. I'm looking at the 1970 edition written by Garner Ted. So by all accounts, this would be the book, and it looks familiar to me. So we may have even had it in the house, although Garner
Ugh.
Ted was on the outs by then, so who knows. So here's the chapters. I'll just read through those. What is a child? Chapter 2, Criminals Are Made, Not Born. I don't know what that's going to be about, but it doesn't sound good. Chapter 3, How Your Child Learns. Good thing they're telling us that. Chapter 4, You Can Punish Your Children in Love. Literally, that's a chapter name.
You can punish your children in love.
Yeah, punishment is not required to raise children. I'm going to tell you that right now. Punishment achieves nothing. Chapter 5, How to Get Results. Chapter 6, Should Children Be Seen and Not Heard? Question mark. Chapter 7, Your Children at Play. Chapter 8, How to Prepare Your Children for School. So this must have been just before the homeschooling movement started within the church.
Mm.
Or just after? Not sure. Chapter 9, How to Help Your Teenagers. Here's the big page that, like, if this is going to encapsulate what this book is about, here it is.
Okay.
Never has there been a time when the truth about child training has been more sorely needed. We are faced with a veritable landslide of juvenile crime and lawlessness, right? Always pumping up how bad the world was.
Hmm.
Besides those future millions who will actually become entangled with law enforcement agencies, there are many times that the number who, even though not actually running afoul of the law, are rebellious, hostile, frustrated, and have no personal desire to make something of themselves. What can you do to ensure yourself against the eventuality of having your children become delinquent and to have a guarantee that your children will grow up being obedient, respectful, considerate, and loving, having the right values and a real sense of responsibility? So, I'm writing this book so that all of your parenting insecurities, you can know that if you listen to me, you don't have to feel so worried about that anymore. So, one thing I've started noticing that the Worldwide Church of God did in their literature is they first try to convince you that you don't know what you're doing and that the supposed scientific authorities also don't know what they're doing, right? So they try to convince you that you can't possibly know the right thing to do and you need to listen to them for the answer. But they're very subtle in how they convince you of that, and they make it actually sound really good. So I wanted to read this one section here. I'm in chapter 1 of The Plain Truth About Child Rearing by Garner Ted. And the chapter is called What is a Child? And starts with this idea, a plan of action. Countless thousands of little babies are carried into homes where exists the naive assumption that all the knowledge and understanding necessary for the care and training of children has come to exist automatically by virtue of the arrival of the infant. Now, that might be true a little bit, that people are like, oh, you'll know what to do. Um, but they go on. There are many mechanics, engineers, artists, or musicians today who are competent in their fields merely because they had the tools, machinery, or instruments near them as a part of their environment. Many mechanics are grown-up boys who began tinkering with machines and automobiles, learning by trial and error, taking them apart and seeing how they were put together again. This, sad to say, is the identical type of training course pursued by most parents in the art of child training.
Is it really?
Simply because the baby is near at hand and is now a wanted or unwanted inheritance of the family, parents blithely assume the child will develop just as they desire. Competent parenthood is looked upon generally as a sort of magic endowment that makes study unnecessary. No grasp of the responsibilities and no vision of the great possibilities are considered essential when entering the career. Sometimes there is no special desire for children, merely a lucky accident. No, how do you feel about that one? No special
I
thought.
will I will remain silent for a moment. You go ahead and keep reading and I'll give my thought.
No special thought is given to the new character problems that arise from day to day. No plan of action is outlined. Oh, that last sentence was from a book called As the Twig is Bent. What then are the new parents to do? From all sides come the hue and cry that the oldest profession on earth, that of child rearing, is facing abysmal failure.
It's not.
What? Wait. I thought prostitution.
Prostitution's the oldest. Prostitution is the oldest job.
Well, so why the fuck did they say that? We all like it's we say that, right? That it's a thing that the prostitution is the oldest profession.
You're right.
I guess that would lead to children. I I don't know why they would say that. Are they trying to talk about women just as being whores? I'm not entirely sure why they would put that in there.
I mean, I think they're just saying it because ever since the beginning of time, whatever the fuck that is, um, women have always given birth to babies, and I guess parenthood is just they just consider that a job.
I guess, but
It's
he's
not a
like, it's
job.
like they're trying to make it seem like people don't just know how to do this. It's like, well, no, but when people lived in communities that were connected and like they got together with other people and like did
Hmm.
work together, like we would have just seen children being raised all around us. Like, so it probably did come off as
Right.
automatic. And since babies happened so automatically before there was birth control, like there wasn't all this thought being put into it.
Right.
But this is where they go and they try to like make sure you're not thinking like, okay, so you don't just inherently know, but also all those authorities don't know either. So what they say is, so they're saying that child rearing is facing abysmal failure currently, right?
Hmm.
There are seemingly countless books on child study, child feeding and care, child training, child rearing, child psychology, and just about child everything. The parents are assured that no one today really knows how to rear children properly. Where are they to turn? The books, articles, and other trivia dealing with the subject are confusing, to say the least. Don't even bother reading all those other things, guys. We're going to tell you you're reading our book. Our book is all you need.
Exactly.
See how subtle they are? Like you can tell it's there,
Oh, yes.
right? They're just like, oh, all those books are just, they just think they don't even, nobody really knows. And there's just so much out there. Like, oh, you don't want all that. You want our message of God's way to raise your children. See how much simpler they made life for people?
It's
Um,
marketing.
okay.
Create the problem, then give them the solution.
So the trouble with this stuff is like to read just a snippet isn't really going to show you the depth of the damage that they were doing because they were so good at their subtle messages that were put through their like incredibly wordy books and booklets over and over and over, just stated in slightly different ways. So this conditioning was super subtle. So it's like kind of hard to lay it out and be like, here's their tenant on this particular thing, but we can look through this and see what they were doing. So we've got section titles like babies are selfish.
What the fuck?
Yep. Okay.
I'm sorry. Oh.
I mean, but we've had some recently, you and I have talked about the word selfish and the idea that like selfish was taught to us as bad. Like anytime I wanted something for me, I was told I was selfish. I was told I was
Yep.
selfish so much growing up. And now as a grown up, I'm like, well, hell yeah, I should be selfish. Selfish to like make sure my needs are met. Because if my
Yep.
needs aren't met, I'm no good to other people around me.
Hmm.
Fuck. Okay.
Well,
Wow.
we know where our parents got it from.
I know. Listen to this though. Like, holy yikes. If the father has had a very busy and nerve-wracking day at the office, the mother has had to do an unusually large washing, clean house, tend the baby, and prepare the meals, and both are very tired, the child is totally unable to think of, understand, or comprehend any of these things. The impulse of hunger, discomfort, lonesomeness, or the pain of an upset stomach is all that is necessary to launch the child on a yowling, howling tirade until it gets what it wants. Hold on. This is not stated here to say that it's wrong or unnecessary to tend to a baby when it cries at night, nor to see to its needs, but to illustrate the fact that we are all born with a basically selfish nature, which thinks only of self.
Well, yeah, we have fucking needs. I'm sorry, your God gave us things like hunger and physical pain and discomfort, and we are reacting in the way that we are supposed to. Our bodies are, I'm sorry, I'm going to go off on a tangent now. Then our bodies need these things, and that is by nature telling us if you're feeling discomfort in your stomach, you're probably hungry. So you need to eat something. No fucking shit. That's selfish by having. Okay, I'm sorry. So if we don't go after our selfish needs, as he's saying, we're gonna die.
Like that's biology. That is the survival of life, is a little mewling infant coming out and letting their needs be known, and literally hormones within the
Mhm.
parent that make a response to that happen. Like biology works.
Yeah.
They're
They're
supposed to be
crying.
selfish. They're
They're
supposed to
crying
be
because they
selfish, and
don't
so are
know.
we. We're
Yes.
supposed to be selfish to have our own needs met. All of
Hmm.
the lonesomeness and obviously the hunger, that shit doesn't go away. We
Nope.
need people. We need to be loved. We need to be acknowledged, to be approved of, to feel confident about what our skills are, to feel worthy of love. These are things we all still need. They just get
Hmm.
more deep and complex and hopefully better understood as we get older. When they're a baby, like they're still working that out, but they do know what they need and they're good at asking for it. It's only when we beat them down and convince them that they don't deserve what they need that they stop asking for what they need.
Yep. Oh, that is so powerful, Pat. You're right. Just getting shut down. Okay, so a baby, obviously, they can't talk yet, but they know something is wrong. That's why they cry. They're feeling cold. They're feeling hungry. They have a pile full of, they have a pile full of shit in their diaper. They know these things and they know to ask for it. Yes, as we get a little older and having churches tell us your needs are selfish and you're prideful and all this. No, by nature, we are trying to get our needs met. And if people aren't getting their needs met in a healthy way, they're going to find unhealthy sources to get those needs met. And that, I think, is what causes criminal acts. Herbie.
Exactly. It is the people that have been abused and broken and left alone and not cared for that find themselves in that criminal behavior. And that's because they need their needs met.
Yes, it's not selfish.
All right, so you want some whiplash?
Oh God, here we go.
So we just went through all that selfish stuff in the book. Next
Yep.
line. On the other hand, children are precious, priceless gifts to any parent. What a pity that more parents today do not understand the real miracle of childbirth, nor are thankful for it. Children are the sweetest, most exciting, and completely satisfying things that can happen to young married couples who are truly in love.
Yeah, you would know
Fuck,
that, Herbie. Sorry.
fuck you. I mean, Herbie didn't write this, though.
It sounds like him just because of Garner Ted
So
was so indoctrinated.
so a line like that, like so completely satisfying, such a sweet miracle. Like, so then as a young couple with a baby or two in the church, you probably weren't going to be okay to say, "Hey, I'm really struggling. This is hard. I don't know what to do and I can't
Right.
hurt my kids that way." There was no room for that.
Nope.
You needed to show that you were doing it the way God said and that you were so happy about everything that was happening.
Yep.
Isn't it a miracle? Yep. Okay, I'm gonna go on. One more little bit here. What then is a child? A little baby is an exact reproduction of the two parents.
What?
Yep. A separate human being who is a thoroughly selfish and completely lovable, laughable, sweet little creature that will steal your heart and your reason, bring you heartache and tears, exultation and pride, anxiety and worry, happiness and joy, but who will teach you the real meaning of the word love. Sounds good, doesn't it? Then you realize that love is by blanket training and spanking so that you can have the perfect life that God always intended and your lawn will be mowed.
Yep.
Hmm.
Oh,
And
no,
you're and clearly the man works in an office, not,
Patty,
you know,
your lawn is
any.
not just going to be mowed. You're going to get like international awards for how amazing your landscape is. Okay. Yeah,
Just like Hervey.
just kidding.
Um
All right, keep referencing him. I do understand that Garner Ted wrote this, but he is like a carbon copy of his father. So.
oh yeah, I mean, well, the whole thing was just a free printing press that brought in tithe
Hmm.
money. Oh, so then there's a section called Should You Expect Disobedience, where he kind of goes through the child psychology of the day that was
Hmm.
coming out and like where, you know, like child psychologists really were starting to study and understand how children learn, how they grow, how they develop their social skills. And so So he goes through and says, almost without fail, modern books available on child psychology will group children according to various ages into certain phases or stages of growth and development. So he goes through some of the things that modern child psychology was saying at the time,
Hmm.
and then set like talking about he gives this whole example of what an 18-month-old would behave like and then goes on to say like from the child psychology books and then goes on to say the 18-monther will do these things only if he has been left without any supervision, has never been trained, never been taught the meaning of obedience, and has been turned out to pasture like any other animal rather than reared by his parents. Let's really understand. Yep. So, all the things that child psychology was understanding about developmental phases and how children's brains actually are in those ages, he was saying, like, yeah, if you don't teach them to obey by then, sure, they'll have those problems. That's what's going on here.
It's so icky. So icky.
Um, then there's a section called the mythical phases of childhood. This is the child rearing book quoting a like worldly child development book.
Mm.
Okay. So it's talking about, you know, we talk about the terrible twos and, you know, between 2 and 3, like we know that kids are pushing their limits and they're like discovering their autonomy kind of. So like I witnessed in that age and it's talked about broadly that that's when kids will push their limits, see what they can get away with, you know, do it
Hmm.
one more time, whatever, like but they're exploring, right? They're exploring at that age. Okay, so this is quoting a book at the time. The change in behavior which takes place between 2 and 2.5 can be rather overwhelming, perhaps the child as well as the adults who surround him. 2.5 is a peak age of disequilibrium. Parents often say they can't do a thing with a child of this age. He wants exactly what he wants when he wants it. He cannot adapt, give in, wait a little while. Everything has to be done just so. Everything has to be in the right place he considers its proper place.
He.
Well, yeah. So that's like the world's view of how kids were at that point. And
Hmm.
so Garner Ted then goes on to say, here we are assured that the little tiny toddling 2.5-year-old human baby who is entirely selfish and yet a very sweet and lovable little reproduction of our own selves, wow, that's gross, is is just bound to act in this prescribed fashion simply because he has reached one of the steps along the ladder of life, the stage at 2.5 years of age. Parents are assured this child cannot adapt.
You know, just looking at our parents, I really object to that whole reproduction of ourselves thing.
So that listen, I know, oh, I object with it too. Absolutely. I would not think that of my own kids. That's gross and
That's
disgusting and not
really,
something I
really
should do to
gross.
them.
And
Yeah.
that is true selfishness.
Uh, mm, yeah, it is. Good job, Nancy. Fuck yeah. Okay, so then Garner Ted goes on to say that means if parents attempt to get him to adapt, they may run the dire risks of breaking his spirit, giving him a complex, or any number of perfectly horrible results. So he's saying that the world is like, not, don't break your kid's spirit. And he's like, what? You're gonna get all up in your sensitivity about breaking a kid's spirit? Well, how else am I gonna make them obey God? Cool. Parents are assured the little 2.5-year-old toddler cannot possibly give in or wait a while. Therefore, the entire household, whether the father is a truck driver, lawyer, or president of the United States, completely revolves around, waits on, is ordered according to, adapted to, and adjusted to the childish whims, all caps, of a toddling 2.5-year-old baby. We see where they stand. The parents are in charge of a house, the kids aren't. I mean, I get that this has been said over and over, and a lot of people think this and think, well, of course, the parent has to be in charge or it'll just be chaos. Like, yes, but there's something being missed about that. The
Hmm.
child's needs are being poo-pooed in this scenario. Not that it's gonna like, why wouldn't you consider the needs of every person in the house when you're doing how you do life? I don't understand that, like, this is my house, my rules, you need to get in line with me.
Right.
Like,
Hmm.
I'm sorry, I brought you into this world. I did not do that so that I could make you do my bidding and just like, well, that's the thing. They're doing it because God told them to, because they're following God's law about making kids.
Hmm.
And so they don't give a shit about the kids, and that makes me mad.
Well, who was it that said recently, if my daughter they're advocating for spanking, right? If my daughter comes home and she's just wiping shit on the walls of the house, you wouldn't believe the beating I would give her. I forget who said that, but yeah. And I'm like, if your child is coming home from school and they're rubbing shit on the walls of the house, there is so much more shit going on than you can believe. And obviously, they feel like they can't talk to you as their parent. You just punish them for bad behavior, not looking and seeing what might be causing this bad behavior. There's other stuff
Exactly.
going on, and they need to talk about it, not continue to be punished because that is how you reach criminal acts level, okay? Like when
Right.
people go to jail, like they get to that point because those needs are not being met.
Garner Ted uh thought, he was doing it right, because he was the leader of the church, right? So of course he was doing it right. So he
Of
goes
course.
on to say, apparently my own children were so ignorant of these stages through which they have been growing, they forgot to express the characteristics that these stages should have demanded of them. At any rate, our children, at the stage of 2.5, never were domineering or demanding. They never tried to give orders. They never made the decisions. They were never given to temper tantrums. They were decidedly flexible and not at all rigid. They were able to adapt to anything. They were able to give in constantly. In fact, several times a day. And they were able to wait, even days or months, should that have been necessary.
Wow. Te
So good job, Ted. You broke them. You fucking broke them right away before they were 2.5. All right, so just to do a little bit of a survey here in chapter 2, talking about how criminals are made, putting the fear into all the WCG parents that if they don't do it right, if they don't make sure they make their kids obey, those kids are going to become criminals.
yeah.
Because authority begins in the home is the first section here.
Yeah. And I'm just going to reiterate that I hate the word criminal because it's so dehumanizing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, then he says, why psychologists fear corporal punishment. So we know that by 1970, there was already countries starting to ban spanking as a method of teaching children.
Right.
And so now in 1970, he's releasing this book, like trying to clap back at the psychologists who are saying, like, hey, we have to stop this. It's hurting kids' brains, right? Um, and so he has his own clapback to that, trying to say that corporal punishment is important. And it makes the non-criminal children.
Says the man who was caught sexually assaulting his masseuse.
We shouldn't be surprised.
No, I'm not surprised at all. Not when his own father was a rapist as well and pedophile.
This section is called Love and Punishment.
Love and punishment
I
in this.
almost hate reading this stuff out loud because they are so subtle with how they put their bullshit in here.
Well, we'll expose it, Pat. So go ahead.
All right, all right. Society cannot seem to reconcile itself to the fact that love and punishment could possibly come from the same source.
Yeah, BDSM.
Oh
Sorry.
God. I,
BDSM has some serious trauma behind it, and I am all for it, I think, if that
well,
works.
BDSM exists because love and punishment have been conflated by fucked up religious systems. BDSM is a place where, by and large, people are working through their shit.
All right, let's see what they say.
Holy shit. All right. It is somehow beyond the realm of conceivability to the average person that there could be any love involved in punishment. Punishment is such a nasty word that some child psychologists have even advocated its deletion from our dictionaries. Today's modern movements to rescind punishments, to abolish the death sentence for demented, brutal, sadistic murderers who themselves have inflicted torturous and horrifying death sentences on perhaps dozens of helpless human beings. The desire of the average wife to have the word obey taken out of the marriage ceremony, and the vast, all-comprehensive movement of religionists to strip the pulpit of its power, rip law and authority from the Bible, and throw discipline to the winds may serve to illustrate the depths to which the root of the anti-discipline weed have grown. So, if you wonder why the WCG was pretty harsh in its discipline, there you go. I don't understand.
I mean,
I,
I don't know what more we can say about that. To me, it seems pretty obvious of the power dynamic that they're trying to get across.
he's equating the idea that not disciplining a child with spanking and everything is somehow going to create, what am I trying to say? See, this is the bullshit, Nancy. This is how they do it. They're like making you think that love and punishment have to go together because otherwise they'll become these horrible murdering people.
Right?
That punishment is love. It's right fucking there.
I think it's the opposite.
Well, of course it's the opposite. We know that punishment doesn't help change anybody.
No.
It just breaks them more. It doesn't help them make better decisions. It doesn't
Well, and there are,
guidance, not punishment.
right. There are people out there that say, oh, I got punished as a kid. I got abused as a kid and I turned out fine. That horse shit. Like, no, I don't think you are fine. That's the problem, is people don't even know um the negative effects that it can have when they don't deal with abuse that they suffered at the hands of the people that were supposed to love them the most.
Well, right. And I mean, there are such a thing as natural consequences to our behavior, and that's just going to happen. That, and we do learn from that.
Mhm.
It's the same as like you touch a hot thing and you get burned and you realize, oh, so it's kind of a punishment, but it's not. Like no one did that. It's just how it happens, and that's how we
Right.
learn. But a punishment is like a imaginary thing that you think is going to happen or did happen because of that behavior, and thinking that that punishment then is going to be that teaching, that like natural consequence of like, ooh, that's too hot. And it can work that way, but it's not true learning.
Yeah.
It's conditioning.
Right.
Punishment exists as like a false natural learning process.
Right. It's inflicted. It's not like, hey, something happened because I learned it naturally. No, someone inflicted this upon me to try to teach me a lesson in something.
Yes, it was the will of someone else trying to make you conform and trying to make it seem like it's a natural bad consequence that you might need to learn. But
Right.
it's that they had a thing that they wanted to inflict on you and a box they
Mhm.
wanted to put you in. Oh, okay. There's chapter 3 is called How Your Child Learns.
How do we learn? Through coercion?
He goes on about instinct to say that humans don't have instinct, but they have a mind.
That is such bullshit. He
Yeah.
wants to say no instinct. How come I could never bring myself to believe that gods or deities existed, despite my efforts? Explain that. If I was raised in this shit, just saturated into my mind from an early age, and I still couldn't make myself believe it. Oh, really? Where does that come from then? Where does it come from? How was I able to not convince myself it existed? And was I using my own brain? Ah, I think I was.
Oh, maybe our parents didn't spank you enough, Nancy. We could go for hours on this book, picking apart the propagandistic bullshit that got so many parents bamboozled and broke the brains of so many kids along the way. But I'll just read this one last little bit that says, when should you begin to train your child?
Okay,
So, beginning at birth is what it says.
of course.
Never too old to learn is truer in reverse. The further it is reversed, the truer it becomes. The more a behavior pattern is affixed to the primary, simple, unconditioned responses, the easier it is to establish firmly. That is to say, the sooner habits are inculcated, the more force they will have, the longer they will endure, the harder they will be to change. That's also from a book called As the Twig is Bent.
Disgusting.
So,
All disgusting.
we went into a little bit on blanket training in this episode and we thoroughly covered some spanking issues. We didn't even get through this book or the evangelical parts at all, Nancy.
Sure, this could have been a 3 or 4 hour episode, but I think, yeah, we just got to cover it in another episode. There's so
Yeah.
much.
I know we had intended to talk about how all of these WCG things are either reflected or mirrored over in an evangelical space and how it has some of those same impacts of training a child in these
Hmm.
very obedient ways that are unnatural for a child's development and how, all of that affects the culture at large. But my goodness, I think we'd be in for a whole series.
Yeah, and we
Mhm.
could be.
We
So at
could be,
least we're,
yeah.
we're getting some of the basic points here. So
If what Nancy and I were talking about today stood out to you as something that's really valuable for more people to be talking about and unpacking their own bullshit around, leave a comment. We'll definitely be taking cues from you, our listeners, for what direction some of these conversations need to go to be the most helpful that they can be. A big, big need for those of us who grew up in high control environments, no matter how many years have passed since we've been out of it, what we all need is a little bit of understanding of what our needs were and how they were ignored back then, so that we can hold that for ourselves right now and acknowledge what our needs were and tell ourselves the truth that there was nothing wrong with us having those needs, that we
right.
still deserve and are worthy of having those needs met as we continue to grow and become more ourselves. So we
Yeah.
want to be here for all the cult kids who've gone through years maybe wondering why they left the church behind and yet their shit still lingers.
Now,
Of course, we still have to take responsibility for the actions that we did in fact do in the world. And that's true, but this is where it becomes like you can't gloss over something like this without a nuanced conversation,
right.
right? And so, like, it isn't their fault. Like, those things set them up that way to where could
Right.
they have gone to do anything else? But at the same time, we can accept that and love ourselves and then go, okay, I love myself enough to recognize that that's where I landed because of everything that happened to me. And I want it to be different. And I'm the only one that can make it different.
Yeah.
And so we break the cycle for ourselves, our internal thinking around ourselves, and we break the cycle for our kids.
So good, pets. Here, here.
And we keep having these conversations on the internet so other cycle breakers have the confidence of knowing that they have been a cycle breaker and they keep passing on that idea because the only way we actually change the world is by talking about this stuff openly and honestly without agendas and without judgment.
Beautiful
And that
pets.
and
So
that's
good.
how we make the world tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Apostate Sisters. And if you'd like to help the show, head on over to Patreon and become one of our sinful siblings. Keep an eye on our YouTube memberships coming soon, where you'll have an opportunity to build even more of a community. Until next time, keep reclaiming your story and stepping into your power. Like and subscribe, everybody.
Yay!